And if you read the chapter in the book where Ben interviews his voice agent instead of the other way round, you find that voice agent saying quite explicitly, voice agents are so powerful, these people. They control basically what we hear. And you hear her saying that these days she never, for any of her clients, gets asked for an RP accent. Moreover, she doesn't get people asking for Yorkshire as such. These days it's, do you have somebody who can do North Yorkshire? Or somebody who can do Hull or Leeds? In other words, they think that the expectations of the listening and viewing audience are now much more sophisticated than they were 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And I think this is true. Because when you study the evolution of accents over the last 20 years, as you've all had to do because you have to teach these things, or at least even if you don't teach them in production, because I imagine most of you will be teaching RP, it is after all still the dominant teaching accent around the English-speaking world. There may only be 2% of the population of England that speak RP, but that's far outnumbered by the population of Moscow, for example, in terms of accent use. Even though RP is still very popular in production, in terms of listening comprehension, as you well know, listening comprehension, you have to acclimatize your students to the range of accents that are out there. And the same goes for the general listening and viewing public as a whole. People are now used to hearing regional accents, not just in the commercials, as Ben was saying, but throughout the BBC as a whole. So, RP versus other accents, it would seem, is the story of the day. And when you actually ask the question, why do people spend so much time worrying about accents in this way, very concerned about the way a particular accent might come across. In linguistics, as you know, one thinks these days very evolutionarily. Cognitive approaches and evolutionary thinking is very much the order of the day. And that's the way I like to look at it as well. If you ask, why are accents so sensitive? Why do we place so much store on them? I think you have to go back to the beginning of the human race in order to explain this. Yeah, think yourself back to 100,000 years ago. You are at the beginning of human speech, whenever it was, roughly then. And you're in your cave. And outside the cave, you hear a noise. So you shout out in your primitive tongue, you know, who's there? Ugh, or something. So anyway, back comes an ugh from outside. If you recognize that ugh, in other words, if it has the same accent as you, then it's probably a member of your tribe, and you can go out and say, you know, hi, how are you, and all the rest of it. However, if the ugh that comes back is something you don't recognize, in other words, the accent is alien, then if you go outside, you'd better take your club with you, because it may be somebody else wanting to take over your cave. So here are accents thought of as the survival of the fittest, the survival of the linguistic fittest. In other words, the better you are at recognizing accents, the longer you're likely to live. And you think, is that a bit far-fetched? No. Because once I made this point to a group of school kids in a school somewhere, sixth formers, 17, 18-year-olds, and one of them came up to me afterwards and said, he says, what you were saying about accents, it's like that where I live, he says. There are some streets I go down, he says, and if I hear a certain type of voice around the corner, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I'll stay out. I'll go the other way. The survival of the linguistic fittest.
So if you extrapolate that to the TV advert thing, is it essentially the companies going, well, RP is no longer the ugh of the people want to hear?
Yes. Well, I think so. You see, the problem with RP is, A, it's a minority accent, an elite accent, certainly, but it distances you, as we'll say in a little while in relation to Shakespeare, from the majority of people in this country who don't speak RP. Most people don't. Moreover, of course, the other big thing about RP, if you've been teaching it, as I guess most of you have, is that it's changed its own character. It is no longer the same RP that it was 20 years ago, and certainly not 50 years ago. And we know this because, A, we've got the BBC archives to listen to, which will show us people saying words like Lord, which in present-day English has a vowel halfway up the back of the cardinal vowel diagram, a nice mid-close Lord. But if you go to Daniel Jones, writing in the 1920s, he puts the vowel right down at the bottom back of the cardinal vowel diagram. In other words, lard, lard. So lard has become Lord over the last 50, 60 years. And there are dozens of other examples showing how RP has changed. The Queen, for example, has been studied in detail from the speech to the throne in the 1950s to the speech to the throne now. And you can hear the changes in her voice, the subtle changes of 50 years ago, where the word man, M-A-N, would have been man, man with an air, and now it's more man with an air. Or the word cup, C-U-P, 50 years ago, cup, with a very open ah, and now it's more cup, with a more centralized quality. And you can plot these things and show that, why would she want to change her accent? I mean, the whole point of accent is to not just express identity, but express a relationship between you and your perceived audience. And if the audience is the entire country, or possibly even the entire world, then you're going to be reacting unconsciously, largely, to those changes that you perceive to be out there. And she is in the same position as I am in relation to Ben, because she has got grandchildren, William and Harry. And
I thought you were talking about monarchic status there for a second.
Yes. But if you listen to the accents of the two youngsters, as I've also done, William was in Anglesey, where I live, for a considerable period of time. I heard him speak on formal occasions and on informal occasions. On formal occasions, he uses a very conservative kind of RP. On informal occasions, he uses essentially estuary English. And features of that are manifest. For example, he uses glottal stops in a place that he would never do in a more public arena, or his grandmother would never do. So instead, I don't mean glottal stops like bottle for bottle, I mean glottal stops like hot for hot, hot for hot, dropping his T at the end of the word. And so this kind of change makes it even more important for us to be more aware of the accents, of sensitivity to accents, and enter your world in that case.